Hashtag Ecotherapy Unfogged with Mark Fielding.
Hello, welcome to Series 5, Episode 6 of Hashtag Psychotherapy Unfogged. As you know, I'm Mark Fielding, psychotherapist and relationship counsellor, and your host. Today, I have the absolute pleasure to introduce ecotherapist, supervisor, tutor, environmentalist, and founder of Roaming Therapies, Simon Heath. And just reading just a couple of paragraphs from Simon's LinkedIn profile, Simon strongly believes that there is a fundamental connection between our well-being and our environment, that we are part of a number of interconnected ecosystems and not separate from nature. He has experienced the benefits of ecotherapeutic counselling at different stages of his life and is a passionate advocate for the many benefits of walking therapy. And just before I bring you in, Simon, I just saw a quote on LinkedIn this morning, which I thought really fitted in beautifully. And it was a Van Gogh quote, apparently. If you truly love nature, you will find beauty everywhere. I mean, I thought that was, maybe you've heard that. I thought that was absolutely wonderful and so true.
It
Um,
is, yeah.
Good to meet you, Simon.
And you.
Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I always ask our guests, the first question is, what personal experiences led you into the field? So could we start there?
Yeah, absolutely. I started I started my training when I was 17, 18. And I did a level two counseling course, realized that the timing wasn't quite right, and then drifted into all sorts of other careers and jobs that I've done over the years. And then found myself working in a call center in a job that I really didn't enjoy. It provided me with certain financial stability, but
Yeah.
that was about it, to be honest. And so decided I wanted to retrain, and I went through a really difficult period during that time of kind of not feeling that I was really living. I would get up in the morning, go to work, come back home, and the whole time just felt as I was in boxes, sort of boxed in at work in this big building, then driving in a car. And I just lost connection with things that were important to me. So I did my training to be a counselor, and then during that training, I think like a lot of people, it's a 2-year diploma course. During that time, you kind of really dig inside yourself and find out what's important.
Okay.
And I also had at that time, I also had some therapy of my own. And I was working with a brilliant counselor who we only had a few sessions that we could work together. And so we did a sand tray exercise. And that sand tray exercise, the usual thing, kind of a load of objects. And I sort of created a sort of a family dynamic in the middle, and I put a little bird. It was a sort of a bronze sculpture of a bird, only sort of a couple of inches high, and I put it on the edge of the sand tray, looking in.
Mm.
And I started doing like we do, sort of talking about what the different objects meant to me, and this therapist just kept bringing me back to this bird on the edge of the sand tray. And I kept sort of almost discounting it and kind of bringing it back to the sort of the narrative that I was kind of wanting to talk about. And they kept bringing me back, and it basically, that bird was a symbol of my connection with nature and those things that were important for me. So as a child, I'd always been interested in nature and bird watching, and I just had lost that in my life. And without that, I genuinely think without that one therapy session, I wouldn't be doing
Mm.
the ecotherapy and the work that I'm doing at the moment.
I mean, it's an understatement to say that that was a real pivotal moment in your
Oh,
life.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
reconnecting you with, well, just I guess a love of nature that maybe you'd lost, which I think a lot of people lose, don't they, in the modern world, really.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
And you know, I feel really emotional talking about it now. It really
yeah,
does. It really is a pivotal moment. I think is
yeah,
yeah, is absolutely spot on. Without that, I don't know. I don't know which direction my life would have gone in at all. But I think it would have
yeah,
been. Certainly wouldn't have been as rich and fulfilled as it is at the moment.
yeah. And I guess the counselor as well. I mean, I guess the intuition involved in keep bringing you back, because I guess it was just intuitive that
Yes.
the counselor kept bringing you back to the bird. Yeah. I mean, that's such a wonderful story. Yeah. And when you told me that story when for our initial meeting, I thought that was really wonderful. Real sliding door moment. Difficult always to find the words to describe these things, isn't it? But yeah,
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I don't think and it feels really grand almost to say it, but it does feel like a life-changing moment. It was
yeah,
one of those kind of just
yeah,
light bulb, a light bulb in terms of idea, but also
yeah,
spotlight into this is this is what's missing.
yeah,
this is the direction that somehow you've lost
yeah.
that I had lost, and it was
Mm,
yeah, an incredibly powerful. And I think about it often,
yeah,
and when I'm working with clients, so, I do I have that kind of quite often with me, this sort of thing of that just one thing, that
yeah,
one question that we ask, or that one
yeah,
observation or reflection,
yeah.
how powerful that can be.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, let me just ask, what is ecotherapy for
Hmm.
our listeners who wouldn't understand what that is?
It's a really broad area of work,
Mm,
that involves or includes a number of different models of being.
mm,
In base and it's most simple, it's working therapeutically outside.
yeah,
Um, and that seems like a really sort of simple answer. And in many ways it is. Um, the type of ecotherapy that I do is walk and talk therapy, which is, as it sounds, it's where I will walk with a client. So rather than meet in a room, we meet outside and then we walk together side by side, and they talk, and
mm,
we hold the therapy session in nature.
mm,
Um, so that's the real sort of simple definition.
yeah,
So the deeper definition for me, and it is a very sort of it's interesting because I've speak to quite a lot of other people that work in the field, and we all have our kind of slightly different take on what ecotherapy is to
mm,
us as individuals. But it's very much about the being in nature, the having,
mm,
um, and it can sound a bit corny, but it's almost like having a second therapist in the room,
yeah,
because
definitely.
the environment that we're in will be changing. I mean, it's in terms of providing things like metaphor, it's
Mm, yeah,
absolutely brilliant. But there is something about working outside and having the environment providing things to us. I'm
yeah,
very careful of the language I use, because
mm,
there's a discussion going on within quite ecotherapy and with the eco psychology at the moment around kind of how much we take from nature,
mm,
and kind of us acknowledging that we are part, like I said like you read in the introduction, we're part of an ecosystem.
yeah,
So there is, and with any ecosystem, there are things that take and things that give.
mm,
Um, but it's about the balance of not us just taking things from nature. Um, but there is an element that's kind of what we do. So, I think a really lovely example is I remember standing in a field with a client. We'd walk for a while. We'd found a space that we would just, like in a therapy session that would be indoors, you just find a space where there's maybe a pause for reflection.
yeah,
And there were two buzzards rising on thermals, and we were quite high up, so overlooking a valley, and they both came up almost at our height, and then one just turned a tail feather and went to the right, and the other turned to the left. And we just watched them both go off in completely different directions. And it, a bit like that sliding doors moment, it was only the slight twitch of a tail feather, and they went in completely different directions. And that, for me, that sort of connection with what my client was discussing at the time, and making choices, it's like that for me is the power of ecotherapy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what an amazing moment. I mean,
Mm.
and I guess being in nature, I mean, the opportunities for can I call that synchronicity? I mean, that's
Yeah,
terrible.
absolutely. Yeah.
That's
Yes.
synchronicity, isn't it? I guess
Mm.
the opportunities for that to be seen, to be observed, and and arguably to happen are more in the natural world, aren't they? Because it's
Absolutely.
constantly changing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we have the option of walking somewhere and then deciding whether we turn right or left, or go forwards at a
yeah,
crossroads, or
yeah.
do we stop and watch the river for a while? Do we get in,
Mm.
do we take our shoes and socks off and have a
Yeah,
paddle? That tree was there last session and the session before, and for the
yeah,
last couple of 100 years.
yeah.
Just, yeah,
Mm.
it's really expansive, and it's very, I guess my core modality, my core modality is person-centered therapy, but I
Mm.
lean very heavily into Gestalt therapy.
Yeah,
So there's a real sense of kind of the figure and groundwork, and kind of,
yeah,
and that idea of, wow, that tree's that tree will outlive us and has already been there three, four
yeah,
hundred years.
yeah,
Where does that leave what we're working
yeah,
with? And
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and then having almost like another therapist, just because I guess, there's, I mean, so much research. I mean, we obviously don't need to tell you this, but there's so much research around, the benefits of trees on our immune system. I mean, there's a ton of research coming out now, and has been coming out for a few years, hasn't it? Around the benefits of being in nature. I
yes,
mean,
yeah,
I guess it's kind of obvious, isn't it? Because I guess we should be in nature because we're made to be in nature, aren't we? But the
yeah.
research, I think, has been brilliant, really. I
Oh,
guess science
absolutely.
catching up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and even on a day like today, we both said,
Mm,
yeah, it's absolutely chucking
mm,
down here. And after this, I'm going out and walking with a
mm,
client for an hour in the woods, and
mm.
you know, we put our wellies on, we put our coats on, and
Yeah.
off we go.
Mm,
Yeah, and just, there's something about, for me, about being outside, in even in the worst weather,
yeah.
you feel alive. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
invigorating,
Yeah.
rather than, for me, just being sat here. If I wasn't going out, I'd be sat here all day, and I'd be like, it's nice and it's warm, it's comfortable, but
Mm,
I'm not out there, and I'm not
yeah.
experiencing.
Yeah. And like you say, I mean, walking in the rain, I mean, I'm fortunate enough, like I walk in an ancient forest every day, and it's so good for
Honestly.
my, yeah, I mean, it's so good for my well-being. When it rains, I mean, the forest just comes alive, I mean, it's
Yes.
just wonderful, isn't it? But can I ask you a little bit around you when we had our initial chat, you said you sometimes work with neurodivergent clients, and
Mm.
I wonder whether you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Funnily enough, I think I've sort of just looked at my client and my supervision list, and the majority of my clients at the moment have some form of neurodiversity,
Yeah, yeah,
and they are drawn, I think, to working outside for a number of different reasons. I mean, every individual is different, but what I have noticed is that there's not the eye contact. We're not sat
yeah,
staring at each other. There's not that
yeah,
expectation that they have, that they have to look at me,
yeah,
or that, so we walk side by side. There's a
yeah,
real kind of that real person-centered thing of, we're walking shoulder to shoulder.
yeah,
Um, and also there's something around movement as well. So
mm,
there's the ability, I think, um, for clients to move, and
yeah,
if they feel that they need to, I don't know, do something with their hands, or
yeah,
fiddle, or it's a lot more natural to do that, I think, when you're already moving and walking, rather than,
yeah,
I think we spend a lot of time as counselors being trained how to listen, but our clients come to us without any idea of kind of what is necessarily expected
Yeah,
or
it's
how
very true.
to behave.
Yeah,
So for a neurodiverse client to sort of then think, I've got to be a certain way within this therapy,
yeah,
can feel even more kind of like it's another mask that they maybe have to put on.
yeah, that's so
Whereas
true.
outside walking,
Yeah,
we don't have that at all.
yeah,
Uh, it's freer, and I think it.
yeah,
Um, I did have one client, and I've got their permission to
mm,
share. But they were very interested in photography and nature, so they would occasionally bring a camera along to our sessions as well. And I remember at one point they were talking quite intently about a, a a topic, and suddenly saw a dragonfly fly past. So we'd sort of followed this dragonfly for 5 minutes whilst they tried to get a photograph of it, and it was, I don't know, there's something about that permission for them to really just express and be
yeah,
fully themselves,
yeah,
which I think if we'd been in a room together,
mm,
that clearly wouldn't have happened.
yeah. And I think it's so true what you say. I mean, this is true, I think, for neurotypical clients, neurodivergent clients, I mean, it's quite full on in a therapy room, isn't it? I mean, if you've
Mm.
never experienced therapy, you come in, you sit down, it's very, very dire. I mean, obviously, as a therapist, you try not to be, overpowering, but I mean, but just by nature, it's a very unusual kind of situation, isn't it, for someone that's not
Yeah,
had therapy? Whereas walking through a natural wood, side by
yeah,
side. I mean, it's just very, very different. And I guess for autistic clients, probably it's much easier. And also, I would say, and I know it's probably more embracive of different aspects in this, but for an ADHD, client with ADHD, the stimulation probably is helpful, because there's all sorts of stuff going on, isn't there? The walking,
yeah.
yeah,
And yeah, so if you've got a client that's a really constantly hyper vigilant to sounds and noises,
yeah,
when we're walking, we walk through those sounds,
yeah,
as opposed to being in a room and maybe hearing
yeah,
something out there that's
yeah,
constantly.
yeah,
We get the chance to move away from things, and yeah,
yeah,
and I've done that with clients in the past where we've gone, actually, this, it's really noisy here, so we've just moved somewhere,
yeah,
or actually it's been too quiet,
yeah,
and so we've moved
yeah,
somewhere. So we have that ability, I think, to be really, it's flexibility, I think,
mm,
is a really big important part of that.
yeah,
Um, and interestingly, I think also for um, for therapists who may be neurodiverse,
yeah, true.
so again, it's that thing of not having to make the eye contact, but
Yeah,
also um, it might be that sitting opposite somebody and feeling uncomfortable and not being able to,
yeah.
actually, you're not giving all of yourself in that scenario. So actually,
No.
yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm doing quite a lot of work with neurodiversity at the moment, with and at the college where I teach. So we've kind of, it's a little bit prominent in my mind, but I think
Mm.
it works both ways.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And the opportunity to unmask, I mean, it's so true what you say, a client that has probably got, burnout from having to have masked, potentially, intersectional personalities their whole life, then steps into the therapy room and then might need to develop another mask. Whereas I guess with the walking therapy, I guess it gives an opportunity to unmask, which is the whole point, isn't it? I mean,
It is
the
absolutely.
connection is enhanced by that. We could do 20 podcasts about that. But let me ask you a little bit. You mentioned your kind of teaching, so I wanted
Mm.
to. I'm trying to pick up the different aspects of things you do. Could you say a little bit about that, Simon?
Yeah, yeah. So I've been teaching counselling for 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah,
And a couple of years ago, with a business partner, we set up a counselling college in Devon, and we teach level 2, level 3, and diploma. And we've got some CPD courses as well that we're running. So yeah, it for me, it's the sort of the second part of a tripod of things that I do.
yeah,
So the counselling is one, and the teaching of counselling is right next to it. It's a very sort of prominent part of what I do, and it's
Yeah.
something I'm absolutely passionate about. I love it to bits. Yeah, it has its challenges like every job, but
Yeah.
I love seeing people coming in, so maybe on the first session of level 2 and being kind of like, oh, I'm feeling really uncomfortable, not knowing anybody, and just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then watching them grow and
Mm.
really watching them develop their skills and their confidence, and then you know 2 or 3 years down the line when they're on a diploma course and they kind of they come in as though they almost like a second home, because the whole college is set up.
Yeah.
We try and make it as comfortable and as pleasant as possible, and fun. We have a lot of laughter, because I think it's important that people really get to get to be themselves and learn
Yeah.
who they are as well. We have to do that with
Mm.
acknowledging laughter and
Yeah.
tears and everything. And
Yeah.
it's a real privilege. I absolutely love doing it.
Yeah. And then, having been, I mean, I didn't do training, but I've obviously been in a lot of these groups over the years. And yeah, I mean, that is always my experience. I go into the group, or I don't really know anyone, but the growth that, I mean, the group dynamic is so, so strong anyway. But the
Yeah,
growth that happens within that kind of counselling training, because everyone there's there for the same reason, and people get to know each other in a very, very deep way,
yeah,
often, don't they?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see really strong
Yeah.
relationships forming. And I have to say, it's quite difficult for us as tutors sometimes, because we're part of that dynamic, but
Yeah. Yeah.
at the same time, we are separate from it as well,
Mm.
because we are the tutors, and
Mm.
there are group dynamics that go on that we're not part
Yeah,
of.
true.
And so in many ways, it's very similar to counselling in itself, in that we're part of
Yeah.
something, but we are also one step slightly removed in terms of the
Mm.
professionalism
Yeah.
and that barrier,
Mm.
which is what needs to be there. But it's yeah, I absolutely love it. Every time I've got a day of teaching, I really look forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the moving around again, I mean, so being an environmentalist, I mean, could I
Mm.
tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years is just being outside and just noticing that there is less biodiversity. There are fewer birds singing,
Yeah.
um, and just the ever-changing environment in which we're living in at the
Yeah.
moment. And I think for me, it's part of my core belief that I could sit there and kind of go, oh, it's rubbish, and not do anything about it.
Yeah.
Or I can actually go, there are things that I can do.
Mm.
Um, I think it's very easy sometimes to feel powerless in terms
Yeah,
of,
definitely.
you see politicians announcing um, policies around, as I say, drilling in the North Sea or what.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just think, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so, I can have a political stance. I can have just general day-to-day living, kind of looking at how my lifestyle impacts on the environment and trying
Mm.
to minimize that.
Mm.
But I'm part of an organization that's based in Newton Abbot, which is the town um, nearest big town to where I live, and also kind of where I do some of my counselling work. And we have a plot in a local allotment, and we work with people who are either wanting to get back into work
Yeah.
as volunteers, and we kind of work with them to upskill them, but also at the same time to engage in kind of what's going on for them on a personal level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also we do a number of different things as well. So we have activities which are, it's really trying to be community based and trying to really push the idea of, a bit like I was saying, it comes from us. If we want to make a difference, we have to make that
Yeah.
difference. So
Yeah.
we do moth surveys, and we have evenings where we all gather around lights and trap moths and identify them and then release them. Or we do. There's a big push at the moment Newton Abbot has just become pesticide free, which is a big part of the work that we've
That's
been doing.
fantastic.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's small steps, but I think it's, if you don't make the small steps, you don't get anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they hopefully lead to bigger change.
And I think it's true. I think people feel, and I probably would include myself in this, just powerless. You know, I mean, in my experience, I love shows, I love nature shows, but inevitably, I've been watching, I don't know, like one of the David Attenborough series, inevitably you see the beautiful wildlife, and at the end, it will be, oh, all of this is dwindling, and the animal's going to go. It's just so depressing, and I think people do feel very, very powerless. I think that is very true.
They
Yeah,
really do. And eco
yeah,
trauma is something that is, I
yeah.
think, is becoming more and more prominent within sort of just, I hear more and more people talking about it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
And ecotherapy, I think it it's a bit of a balancing act, because there can be that thing of, we're immersing ourselves in nature and
yeah,
growing that connection, which feels so powerful.
yeah,
But with that also comes a certain sadness of how fragile
yeah,
it is as well. So there's a real balancing act. And
mm,
I've had clients that will bring up the eco trauma
yeah,
work whilst we're outside, and that's, yeah,
mm,
it's incredibly.
mm,
I have to be very careful, because there is a tendency, I think, for people to want to be rescued from eco trauma,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it's yeah, I don't have the answers, but
mm,
I don't know anybody. I don't know who has really, and I think that's a scary thing. We're kind of all
yeah,
looking. It always seems to be people looking to other people to solve things, which is why
yeah,
I think,
yeah,
for me, grassroots, community level,
yeah,
trying to make
yeah,
changes where we can.
yeah.
That's where that feels important.
And linking in the yeah, I mean, linking in the work you do, I mean, especially the kind of walking and talking in nature. This is why I think, ecotherapy, forest therapy. I mean, there's lots and lots of different kind of disciplines,
Yeah.
coming up around reconnection with nature. This is why I think the work you do is so incredibly important, because reconnecting people that live in a really, really artificial Western world of,
Mm.
lights and electricity and not going out. I just think it's so important, and the fact that it is growing internationally, I think can only be a good thing, because people really
Absolutely.
do need to get reconnected with nature. I
You
mean,
do.
even people in cities, I mean, there's parks there. I mean, there is nature to be found, isn't there, if you're looking?
There is, and it's
Yeah,
interesting, because the one of the things to do at the college is we run an ecotherapy diploma,
yeah,
and one of the things we do on that course is some of it is room based, because naturally, there is learning that it's much easier
yeah,
to work on bits of
sure.
paper and stuff than outside.
Yeah,
But when we do go out, we work in we we're really lucky where I live, so we go to the local park, but we've also got Dartmoor just, a few miles down the road, and we do some work on the beach, but we spend the day working in a city centre,
yeah.
and actually really being sort of deep in the middle of the city, and saying, okay, how can we work therapeutically, so safely, with our clients, and
Yeah,
confidentiality is a big part of that,
yeah, of
but
course. Yeah,
also how can we engage with the eco and the ecotherapy
yeah,
when we are in a concrete jungle.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's surprising when you start tuning in what there is
yeah,
in terms of variety of life and variety of
yeah,
connections that can be made.
yeah, yeah. And even, I mean, this is probably going to sound really corny to our listeners, but I mean, even seeing the daisy growing in the cracks of the pavement, I guess it's just that fun. I mean, mindfulness is probably a part of this, isn't it? I guess we need to be looking for it, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, we need
Yeah,
to be present. I mean, to see that kind of thing and connect with nature in the city, particularly, I think you've just got to be mindful enough to be present. You've got to be present enough to see it, I think.
I think so.
Yeah,
And I know that, when going right back to the beginning, when I was saying about just me driving to work and then back again,
yeah,
there's a sort of a hermetically sealed box that we
yeah, for
we
sure.
move in
Yeah,
to get into another box. and during that time, with I don't know, the radio's on, or
Yeah.
there's very little time to walk down a street and just go, what can I smell?
Yeah.
What can I hear? Because everything just becomes background
Yeah.
noise,
So true.
and actually just to be able to stop and go, "Do you know, there is a daisy growing through the pavement, and how has that done that?
Yeah.
How is
Yeah.
something so small
Yeah.
broken through concrete? Or
Yeah.
you know, there are birds flying, or you can hear sparrows chirping, or
Yeah.
gulls crying, or whatever it is. There's always something, but
Yeah.
it's just, I think sometimes just stopping
Yeah.
and just switching that switch in our brain to say, I'm acknowledging that, and
Yeah.
that is part of me, and I am part of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what you said in the LinkedIn profile about the kind of
Mm.
interconnected ecosystems of which we are a part. I mean, that is clear. I mean, it's clearly so true, isn't it? But I guess human beings, we don't always feel that because we have become so disconnected from nature. But of course, we are we're part of nature, aren't we?
We
Obviously.
are
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
yeah, and it's that thing of, I love the fact that you keep saying reconnecting with nature,
mm,
because so often people say connecting with the environment, and
mm,
actually we're all part of our environment all the time. But
yeah,
this right now, this is my environment, and you've got
yeah,
your environment
yeah,
there. Yeah, they might not necessarily be wild environments, but they are still
yeah,
things that we're connected to, spaces and places. So
yeah,
yeah, it is that connection, reconnection with nature, and actually, I think we are part of it. I think
mm,
so often we elevate ourselves above
yeah,
and
yeah,
think of nature as a resource.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
and we are part of, we're so much a part of it, and the real therapeutic times come when, as clients and therapists, we stop and we recognize that,
yeah,
we
yeah.
feel that.
Yeah. And I guess, and just going back to the research, I mean, I mean, we literally, yeah, I mean, it is our way of being, but we literally are part of nature. I mean, we interact with everything, don't we? With the
Yeah.
trees, I mean, we are literally, interconnected with all of this, but I think it is so easy to lose sight of it in the modern world. I'm I'm
Yes.
running out of time a little
Okay.
bit, so and I could probably talk to you all day. But I want to get in. I want to ask you about your counselling toolkit. Could you say a
Yes.
little bit about that? Because we talked about that, didn't we, when we met previously?
Yeah. So that is something that is a, a, a project that I've been working on for a while now.
Mm,
And it's a series of tools for counselors. I'm aware that when I'm teaching students, say, "Oh, I really want to sort of have things that I can work with
yeah,
clients." Um, and so based on that, I've been working on designs for a series of cards, or a couple of series of cards that
yeah,
clients can use. And we're just at the process now of speaking to some printers to try and get, again, and what I want to do is get cards and things printed, but I don't want to have stuff wrapped in plastic, and
yeah,
looking for it to be recycled
yeah.
material and everything else. So we're at that stage of just working out kind of where everything
Mm,
will go. But also in part of that will be some online training as well. So I'm going to be doing some
yeah,
um, sort of tips and tricks kind of training, and also some really interesting ways of using just everyday objects in terms of working with clients. So
yeah,
we've got a series of probably 3 or 4 training programs, and also some tools that can be used for not just student therapists, but also people that have got experience that just want to explore doing things a bit more creatively.
And if our listeners want to get hold of you for any of the things that you offer, and obviously
Yeah.
we put all your links on our various social media platforms, how do they do it, Simon? How do they get?
To be honest, probably the easiest thing is either to visit my website, or to just drop me an email, and
Yeah,
I'm happy for you to put my email in the links to anything.
okay, we'll do.
That's probably the easiest way. I would say phone me, but to be honest, I'm so busy doing lots of things all the time that I very rarely get a chance to actually answer the phone straight away.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
email is probably the quickest and easiest way, and then I'm more than happy to talk to people or to start a conversation online or however.
Okay, and as I say, we'll put all of your kind of details on our social media platforms. I always end the interview, Simon, by asking our guests what, I mean, maybe this is going to be obvious your answer, but what do you do every day to sustain your own good mental health?
Yeah, it's a good question because I'm aware that the my go-to place of being outside in nature is also kind of where I work.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
I choose places that are lovely places to work. So, I'm constantly looking for new places to go and visit.
Mm.
But I also recently have started climbing. Um, so my son and I, we go climbing a couple of times a week. It's indoors, and we do bouldering, which is without the ropes. It's just kind of climbing up walls. But it I find it so centering,
Yeah,
because it's engaging physically the body, but
yeah,
also my mind, and sort of
yeah,
thinking about the routes and working out when I'm halfway up a wall, where do I go now?
yeah.
Yeah, and it's something to do with strength, but also a lot to do with technique. And it's just a really
Mm,
all-round body
mm,
and mind workout.
mm,
Doing that, I find that whatever else I've got going on in my head
mm.
just just disappears.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a real mindfulness for me.
yeah, because I guess you have to be, you really have to be present, don't you? Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't be
yeah.
sort of hanging on with one hand and go, oh, did I put,
Yeah, did I
did I
put washing on or
it's just like,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so body and mind, I guess it's quite a holistic thing, really.
absolutely,
The
yeah.
climbing.
And I think, yeah, in the same way that I think working outside for me is holistic. It is the
Yeah,
whole body, and yeah,
yeah,
moving through nature. There's something about movement and body and mind all connected for me that feel
yeah.
important.
And before we finish, is there anything that you would like to say that I've not given you the opportunity to, Simon?
I don't think I feel
Yeah,
as I've talked. I think I've talked and talked and talked. And like you said a couple of times, oh, we could probably fill up a whole afternoon with this kind of
yeah.
thing. So, no, there's nothing particularly that I am else that I've got to say. I don't think.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
and I have to say, I mean, I'm so passionate about this subject. So, I'm really chuffed to have had you on, Simon. And it's been
Thank
really
you.
nice to see you again.
And yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And once again, I'd like to thank Simon for coming on the show. I mean, as I said at the end of the interview, I mean, I literally could have talked to Simon all day. I mean, as our listeners will know, our regular listeners, this is a subject that I am incredibly passionate about, and I try and cover as much on the show. It was just an absolute joy, really, to talk to Simon. I mean, some of the experiences he had in nature, when he was talking about the buzzards and the synchronicity involved, I just think is incredible, and the ability to use metaphor in nature, and nature being almost like another therapist in the room. I mean, I say almost like, but the reality is that nature is another therapist in the room. So much research coming out now, and has been from for a few years. I mean, a lot of it originally coming from Japan and South Korea, but increasing research around the benefits of being in nature, which seems obvious, but I think it is good really for the science to kind of catch up and just prove what I think probably we all instinctually know. I mean, certainly in the West, I mean, we do live a very, very artificial life, and as Simon said, I mean, being in an inner city, it is, it doesn't exclude connecting with nature. I mean, there is always nature. There are sparrows, there are plants. I mean, sometimes I see plants growing out of the top of buildings, and I think, goodness me, how on earth did that happen? I mean, nature always kind of finds its way. Um, so yeah, another really, really fantastic interview for series 5. Yeah, so if any of our listeners want to get hold of Simon, check out all of his links, which we'll have alongside the podcast, the YouTube channel, and on our various social media platforms. I don't know whether our listeners picked it up, during the interview, but I have to say, I always get really emotional talking about the environment, talking to ecotherapists, talking to, people that forest that instruct in forest bathing and work with groups. And I don't know, I just get very emotional because it is such an important subject, and so important for all of us, really. And I think it's such important work that is being done in helping people reconnect with nature, because obviously the more people that can reconnect with the natural world, then the more people will become environmentally aware, and and be able to, just in their own way, feel empowered to make a change. It makes me think of Greta Thunberg, and I know people have different kind of opinions about Greta Thunberg, and she can be quite maligned, really, by people, I think very unfairly. But I have to say, I quite admire her, really, and I think it really shows how one person can make a difference. She started, and she's sitting outside her school on a climate strike, and it really does show how one person can make a difference. And completely in agreement with Simon. I think we often feel really powerless. I know I do often to, affect any change, but every person can make a difference, and I think it's almost like a kind of critical mass thing, isn't it? I think the more people that get involved and start to really, create lives that fit in more with the environment, and start to put pressure on governments and, other systems in terms of really, really linking into the environment, green energy. It's a big conversation, isn't it? But the more people, I think, reconnect with nature, then, hopefully the more present that conversation will be in kind of political and other arenas. So another really great interview for season 5. I think our listeners will agree season 5 is turning into a really, really fantastic season. As I always say at the end of the show, if you're enjoying the show, please subscribe. It helps us in so many different ways. So if you are enjoying the show, please hit that subscribe button. You can also check out the videos on YouTube, hashtag psychotherapy unfrog Mark Fielding. As I always say, YouTube's still not doing very well. We need to do some work on the YouTube channel. The numbers are slightly going up, but they're miles behind our kind of audio numbers. So Joe and I are probably going to have to do a little bit of work on that. I think it's quite a different beast, YouTube to the audio podcast. Audio podcasts are doing incredibly well. Coming up, I've got some really, really great guests coming on. I'm going to be interviewing, probably in the next interview, Lee Balcom from New York. He's written many books around marriage counselling. He's a relationship counsellor, therapist himself. That should be a really, really interesting conversation. Not entirely sure where we're going to go with it, because Lee could talk about relationship counselling, and we could cover many areas, but I'll let you know. That should be a really, really good one. Really, really good interview. And as I always say at the end of the show, to our listeners, do look after yourself, look after each other, and look after the planet. And I'll see you soon on the next episode.